What up, our little honeydews, and welcome to Sippin N Bitchin, where the drinks are icy, but the book talk is spicy. We're your main bitches. I'm Sam.
And I'm Steph. I see what you did there, and that was so clever.
I know.
Something like that. She thinks she's clever. We're gonna pretend.
I am.
But for once, it's not Nalani. So like, go us,
No.
because we are an equal opportunity caffeine ingester.
Alani, please still sponsor us, though.
Yeah. No, I prefer the Alani. Let's be real. I drink.
Kind of wish
So
it was
I
Alani.
do drink coffee. I enjoy coffee. I typically do iced, but if I can, I do frozen. And let me tell you, my coffee is probably just sugar, which is fine. I love a sugar moment. So I'll do like a caramelized coffee, or I'll do like a frozen, like essentially a frappuccino, but like I don't
Yeah.
do Starbucks. It's not the vibe that I
Yeah.
enjoy. And y'all can like what you like. I'm more of a Dunkin' girly. So I'll do that, or I'll do
Dutch
like a
bro.
cold brew. Well, we don't have Dutch bros here.
I know. I don't
So
know if I could do a cold brew. That's very powerful. Like, I feel like that's a very, like, bold
yeah,
flavor.
I get cream and a syrup, like a flavor syrup. So I'll do like a mocha cold brew, or I'll do like a caramel cold brew. And typically if I do a syrup, that's the sweetness, and
I like
that's
to do
literally,
syrups, but I made myself only do creamer in this, so if I cringe, it's because I'm getting used to that.
yeah, creamer sometimes upsets my tummy and it's hit or miss. So, and I tried like oat milk. I've tried. It's not the same. I don't want the
Yeah.
aftertaste.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather just suffer later, you know? You know what I'm saying?
I'm just hoping that I don't have to, because I just took a few sips. I'm like, I hope I don't have to like run to the bathroom because the
Yeah,
coffee
well.
do hit.
Well,
But yeah,
maybe
no.
just sip on it. Drink some water in between. It'll be fine. Yeah. There you go. Balance.
Yes.
Okay. We went on a tangent already on our caffeine. But we made it to episode 3. Go us. Woohoo. Technically it's not it's episode 3 because we're on the 3rd book. But last week I was editing and I was like, I'm making this 2 parts. I'm not subjecting these beautiful people to listen to all of us like in one sitting. That's too much.
We got a lot to
So
say.
yeah, and
I
also
want it
these
to be
books are kind of
absorbed.
lengthy,
Yeah.
so it is what it is. So this book is no different. The Crown of Gilded Bones was 50 chapters, so we'll probably do a 2-parter. If it gets too lengthy, it'll be a 3-parter. But we're gonna just
I
go through.
I have a feeling that's kind of like the expected for the next few books because there's a lot that they pack into the books coming up. So,
Well, this is also
yeah.
the last book before we switch to the prequel series. So we did post on Instagram the order in which you're supposed to read the book. Well, not you're supposed to. The recommended
Our
order that you
recommended, our
should
preferred.
enjoy these
Yes.
great books. So the next book will be A Shadow in the Ember. So get your copies, get to reading. 2 weeks, we'll be back. So if we are doing 2 or 3 parts, this will release on Wednesday. The next part will be released tomorrow, and if we have a 3rd part, that'll be released on Friday. So go team, we did it.
Yay.
But let's jump into it because I feel like we have so much to cover.
Yes.
And I mean, time is of like by the time y'all are listening to this, I've cut this down and I've made it all pretty and bundled up and with a bow for you. It's
So
fine.
you don't have to go through the painful part. We do, and that's knowing where to cut things off because we like to just talk about these people.
I could literally talk, which is so funny because as we move into the next book, we
Oh
want to
man.
talk even more
Yeah.
about them. You know what I mean? So anyway,
We're getting to
where
the
we
part in these
where
books where we're knowing people that we're going to see coming up in
yeah.
the prequel, and we're like having to rein ourselves in, and the pain it brings us of having to rail things in that we know is
Doing the show notes.
hard.
I was writing the show notes earlier and I was like reading something and then I paused and I went and I like gasped and I said, "Wait, Samantha, is this?" And she was like, "Yes, honey. Did you not get that when you reread it?" And I said, "No, because I wasn't processing that." I was processing of it.
And they won't even know it until the 4th book. So they have like a month before they'll know what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's tragic. But
Oh,
like
it is.
hype, but tragic. It's
Yeah,
such a
that's
great ride
great.
to go on, and it is what it is.
I'm so
But the
excited.
end of book 2, our queen, our beloved mother-in-law. Lower your swords. Lower them. Okay, listen. So when this happened, I was so confused originally.
Mm-hmm.
First time. I was like, I'm pretty sure that that's not how you announce another queen, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that
Right.
there's like a whole like hierarchy of like,
Right.
yeah, so I know the whole like they've outlived their term. Whatever, cool. But like in my
Mm-hmm.
head, I'm like, there's like a coronation and a party, not like a lower
Like,
your swords
yeah.
because this is your queen. Like, calm the F down.
Yeah, like you
Uh,
think, oh, there's steps that have to be taken, but no, they see someone with glowing eyes and they're like, here's the crown, have fun. Like, what? What? Sorry?
yeah, and then everybody's like bowing down to her.
The
And if I
Wolven are
was
still
Poppy,
surrounding her.
I'm like, I'm overstimulated. Please let me go back home
Mm-hmm.
and sleep and reset my social battery because
Yeah.
that's a little too much for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then she's like out here summoning the Wolven. They're all like, "What's up with my queen? Let me at her."
Yeah.
But like not
They're
let me at
growling
her,
at
but
anyone
like,
that like steps towards her.
and I'm just like, okay, I'd love that kind of bodyguard. That's the kind of bodyguards that Taylor Swift needs. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Oh, Delano would take care of it, man.
I literally am just like,
Although she would wish they were cats. She'd want like the cave cats version of them taking care of her.
listen,
Excuse us. We were watching the concert before
yeah,
this.
we were, and there's no shame. Also something that we learn is that all the bonds that the Wolven have been broken.
This is very evident when Kieran is growling at Castile to back the F off, and we're like, whoa, 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 whoa. What's
And
going
just like
on?
I like, and they, mind you, their friendship exceeds lifetimes. You know what I'm saying? Like they're brothers, whether they're
Mm-hmm.
born brothers, blood brothers, it don't even matter.
Right.
So essentially, she has to call them all off.
Mm-hmm.
That was wild to me. Like this girl went from having no freedom, no choices, to literally having well, in my opinion, the strongest furry loving like bunch of people that she could even ask for
Yeah.
protecting her. Like I just feel like she could control them, like she's finally in control and she's like, I don't want all
Mhm.
this. Like I don't want to come between y'all. Like,
Yeah,
you know.
it's too it goes from the overpowering emotion of helplessness to the overpowering emotion of this isn't what I meant when I said I didn't want to be helpless. Like, and I gotta give her props for the quick thinking with the Wolven, because I would have been so overstimulated. I don't know if I would have thought well enough to be like calmly like, no, we can trust him, back down. And they all like, okay, let's just sit down and be happy. Could not.
Yes. So there's now this new bond between Poppy and the Wolven is called the Primal Notum. Notum? Notum. I think it's
Notum. I
Notum.
I say
Notum?
notum, but I don't know. That's
All
how
right.
I say it.
I'm
How do
sure we
you
should have
guys
looked up
say
a
things?
pronunciation. Yeah, we probably should have looked up a pronunciation, but we don't do that because YOLO. And something that I've noticed throughout this whole book, we're gonna go chapter by chapter typically, and kind of bunch them up. But something that I've noticed is every single time this bond and then connection is brought up and she like alludes to it and or like makes mention of it, she never says primal notum or notum. She just
Mm-hmm.
says that primal bond thing or that bond that
Mm-hmm.
I have. And then the person she's talking to always spells it out for her, like always says it in its entirety. And I'm not sure. I think that might contribute to like the immensity of it, like how big of a deal it actually is, because
Mm-hmm.
something that these Wolvens have been so conditioned to, like their bonds with the bonds that they've been used to, and now like the I'm protecting you at all costs, and I will eat my brother if I need to. Like that's
Yeah.
wild.
And I wondered, did you? Because when I read this at the time, I wasn't thinking like primal, like as anything other than like, primal instincts of like that's nature taking in kind of control. Because
Oh,
at this
I
time, we knew of
absolutely.
like deity and gods, and that was like it.
Yeah,
And
I
so I was like, oh,
didn't
it's just their
even
like
think that.
primal instinct. It's the animal of them that knows it and
Which,
stuff.
and that makes sense considering the context of the situation. But
Yeah.
then they go into this whole well, partially explanation of how you have the blood of a god in you, and Poppy's all like in denial, like, I'm mortal, I'm not special, like, please,
How do you
and
think?
they're all like, honey, you are mortal, but you're also descended from a deity, the children of the gods, and all it takes is a drop of God's blood, and that supersedes any oath the Wolven have taken. And I'm just like,
It's
can I
wild.
get some of that?
Just one
Gladly have
drop, like just one drop.
Kieran and Delano like protect me at all costs. Like,
Oh, I found the
don't tempt me with a
pronunciation
good
guide.
time. What does it say?
It said, well, okay, come on.
Well, you can
Notum,
load it.
no Tom.
No Tom.
Yeah, notum. So I guess it's like notum, no Tom. Primal notum? Notum? Because it says NO-TOM.
Tom. No Tom.
Yeah, so
No Tom.
notum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we just learned something new. Just reading these books. It's no big deal. So essentially the moral of the story is Cass is just like, he's not even phased by this development.
Sorry. Okay, really quick. So we have a friend reading this book, and that's unhinged in itself, the comments she makes. But I was talking to her about it last night, and she was saying do you say Malik?
Malik.
For yeah, okay, she was saying Malik. And I was
That's with
like,
the
what?
Q.
And then I was like, well, is it Malik and Malik for like the old king and the son? Well, the pronunciation guide, it is Malik
Oh,
for
well,
the
she's
king.
listening to it. This is a cheat. This is cheat because she's listening to it. So it actually says it correctly.
Problem is, I listened to it the first time too, and I didn't.
Oh, well,
Whatever.
I'm just
But
rude.
the son is Malik, but I was laughing how they separate it
Wait,
because it says Malik. So it's
Malik,
Malik.
Malik the
Malik.
brother or
Yeah.
Malik the
So the
dad?
king Malik is
Okay, there you go.
Maleek.
Malik.
Malik. And then the son is Malick.
Malik. Malik. So it's
Malik.
Malik for the
It's
brother
Malik
and
and
Malik
Malik.
for
Yeah.
the king.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
not gonna
could
say
you
that
confuse me
properly,
even more?
but yeah, I could. You want me to keep reading
Anyway,
this list?
no, please, please don't, because I've already derailed. Anyway, Cass is unfazed by these developments. He's just like, I don't care what the hell's going on. I'm protecting my girl. Y'all can fight me, but as long as
Mhm.
we're all protected, like it doesn't matter until it's the realization that like Kieran will attack you, dude. Like
And he
you
didn't
are
even
also
care.
considered a threat. And he was like, I'm gonna protect my wife at any cost.
Yeah. He was like, yeah, this is my best friend, like my brother, but I'll take him down if that's what it takes to get to her to make sure she's okay. And I was like, that kind of thinking, like, oh,
Oh,
that's
I
a
applaud you, dude.
man.
And then Poppy's like, I ain't having any of this. Stop it right now. Like, I can't.
Hmm.
Y'all are crazy. Crazy.
It's so funny
Um,
how she goes from like her switching between using the ether versus normally, because when she uses the ether, she's like, I'll kill all of you. I don't care. But then she's normal. She's like, guys, don't fight. You love each other.
and it's so funny. So they go through this whole thing, this whole thing about like people are about to rip Castile's face off because he's whatever. And it finally settles down, and Cass is like, can you get some clothes for Delano and or from the horses? So when they shift, they don't scar anyone. And Poppy goes, I think their nakedness will be the least scarring thing to happen today. And I was like, that is the realest thing that I've ever like mood,
Oh,
girlfriends. Like, I think there are
yeah.
bigger things at hand than that. But it just solidifies how their Cast and Kieran's bond is null and
Hmm.
void, and that she has some badasses protecting her now.
A lot of them. Because I think it's in chapter 2, or was it in chapter 1, where I think it was Delano or someone called Morwolven to them?
I
Was
think that
that
whole
this
thing.
part? Yeah.
I
And it's
think
just like
so.
you could hear just like the like rumbling of all the wolven coming. That might have been later, I don't know. But it's just like there's a lot of wolven protecting her, man.
Yes, and
She's
this chapter ends With Cass going, a move against my wife is a proclamation of war against me. Their fate is already sealed. And secondly, ooh, this man.
Love it.
So then he turns his head to the side and he goes, you, and let me tell you, this is where the whirlwind, it was already a whirlwind, you know what I'm saying? But this is where the man I
Yeah.
just listen, there are plenty of bad guys in this series. Don't
Mm-hmm.
get me wrong, plenty. I genuinely think Alistair is very top of my list, if not top of my list, which says a
Ugh.
lot for who,
He's the
like, there's,
umbrage.
he's the umbrage, thinking you're doing the most, but you're really
Mm-hmm.
doing the least. You're
Yeah.
actually a
I'm
terror to
protecting
society.
everyone, but really you're protecting yourself and your power and you. Yeah.
Correct. So yeah, so Alistair, he's sussy as heck, and Poppy is so smart. She came to the realization like he wanted you were gonna marry his daughter, and then he tried to set you up with his what was she? Great
His
niece.
great niece, yeah.
And I'm just like, girl, you got a brain, and I'm so glad you could use it. Um, and every single time there's a conflict or there is some doubt to his actions or something, he goes, does that mean you finally given up on your brother? That's like his cop out. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
the two things are not mutually exclusive.
And he was the one telling him in the last book, oh, you need to give up on your brother and go back and become king because he wanted him to marry his niece. And now that this is happening, he's like, oh, so now you give up on your brother. It's like, dude, do can you flop like a fish out of water any harder with how much you're switching things?
Um, yeah, and so essentially Cass has him detained, whatever, and he goes, the truth of what is happening here will be revealed. Everyone will know that I am not the threat. And the arrow. So sorry, every time I reread this, I'm like, oh,
I hate this part.
I hate this part too. So an arrow zings through the air, and Kieran's hit with the arrow, right? And then something hits Castile. It's just a clusterfuck. And Poppy's like freaking out because between him and Kieran and
And then
Jasper, like
Jasper, yep.
she just like felt absolutely nothing. And she goes, he was lost to me.
Oh, well, they turn
And
cold and gray, like,
like
oh,
they like dead, right? And um her skin began to vibrate as a dark and oily soul deep rage rose within me. It had a tang like metal in the back of my throat and burned like fire in my veins. It tasted like death. Ew, okay, I don't know if I want to taste death. And not the
yeah.
kind that occurred here, the final kind. And then this whole scene just infuriates me. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just anyway, the primal power surges, invades all her senses, and there was nothing else, no empathy, no compassion. Um, which goes back to your point, like when she is channeling this ether, she gives absolutely no fucks.
Yeah. Oh no, she would have destroyed all of Atlantia if she had to. Like that's that primal like instincts taken over, like that ether's taken over, like oh.
And then she's fighting a bunch of bitches. Yeah, I'm calling them bitches.
Mm-hmm.
Away, and then toward the end of this page, it's a silvery white light edged into my vision as I heard a voice, a woman's voice, whispering inside me. It wasn't supposed to be this way. And in a flash, I saw her, hair like moonlight, as she thrust her hands deep into the ground. Badass. Some
Mm-hmm.
inherent knowledge told me that she was where this temple now stood, but in a different time, back when the world was an unknown place. She threw her head back, screaming with a kind of pained fury that throbbed relentlessly inside me. Girl, same. Female Rage, the musical. Silvery white light drenched the soil, radiating out from where she touched. The ground cracked open, and thin, bleach white fingers dug out from all the dirt around her, nothing more than bones. Her words reached me once more. I am done with this, all of this, as was I.
Who's afraid of little old me?
I'm
You
so
should
sorry for all
be.
that. I'm so sorry for all these Taylor Swift references, but we're not.
We're not.
But Poppy is full on rage, like, fuck these bitches. I'm going ham. And at the end of this chapter, Alistair meets her gaze and says, I'm not the threat to Atlantia. You are. You always have been the threat. And she fell into nothing, and Alistair can go fuck himself.
Yeah, someone came up behind like a little bitch and knocked her out.
Something that I want to note too is toward the end of that chapter, if you read it versus listening to it, she italicized him. And
Hmm.
typically when she's referring to him, she's referring to Castile. And in this moment, she's referring to Alistair. And I thought that was a very like
Yeah,
juxtaposition of like the love of my life, him, and then the fuck y'all, him.
yeah. Like that italics changed the whole meaning of it because before it's like I saw him and it's like all happy and this is like in the chaos I saw him. And it's like
I
you can
know.
just hear the difference in
The
the tone
hear
just
the
with the
rage.
italics. Yeah.
Exactly. And then chapter 3 starts off with our lovely little nursery rhyme.
What a
It's
pretty little flower, what a pretty poppy. Pick it up and watch it bleed. Not so pretty any longer. Ugh. Oh, I hate that.
yeah, no, I don't like that either. Um, so my show notes crack me up.
Yeah.
So the chapter starts with a creeper staring at her, dark, empty eye sockets from a dusty, dirty soul.
Love it.
Sorry. And she also realizes that someone removed her sweater and left her in just a too thin slip that she wore under her top. And I read this and I was like, what is the point of this? What
Even my note was like, but why? Two question
like
marks.
what does that accomplish? And she has bones, polished ivory bones twisted around her wrists, bones and vines. And some part of them dug into her skin. And she is in a crypt.
Yep.
And she's like, this is not like I'm not the first person to see this crypt, and I probably won't be the last.
Yeah.
And then the realization of trying to figure out like, oh shit, Castile, or oh, like try and
Mm-hmm.
figure out what's going on, and she goes to stand, and she realizes that her binds are binding.
Yeah, they're not regular bones. They burn and like um what is it? Cinch down when you're trying
Yeah.
to like escape them.
And she gets even more angry because she's like, I'm gonna kill Alistair slowly and painfully. Mood, girlfriend
Mm,
mood.
go girl.
Um, and someone says, those aren't normal bones you're handling, they're the bones of the ancients. And she's like, this sounds a little familiar. Mm, I hate this man.
Right before that though, I think she had a great realization. She was thinking about the Chamber of Nyctos. And she said, I hadn't lost myself when I killed those people. It's still been there. I just hadn't cared to hold back or curtail whatever power had come alive inside me. I didn't even feel guilt now. I didn't think I'd feel remorse later either. So she becomes a whole new other person, but when she's out of it, she remembers it and she's like, mood, like I don't regret what I did. Like
Well, no, I mean, I wouldn't regret it either.
mm,
Um, so the bones are the bones of the deities. They carry primal magic within them. And it's said that Nyktos himself bestowed the power on the bones of the dead, an act he carried out when he ruled over the dead in the Shadowlands, when he was the Asher, the one who is blessed, the bringer of death and the guardian of souls, the primal god of common men and endings. And this
makes
is
me
the
so excited
first.
for the next book. I'm sorry, just reading that part gets me so excited.
So if she pulls on these blinds, they'll tighten. You keep doing it, they'll cut through your flesh and into your bone. Eventually, they'll sever your limbs, which sounds disgusting,
Mm-hmm.
but it's fine. It's gross. Anyway,
Yep.
um,
And she still doesn't know who she's talking to. Like that hasn't come
yeah,
to light
no
yet.
idea. They're talking about the binds, and they're talking about what
She's
like
too
why would these
powerful.
yeah, why would these binds even need to be like a thing, like
Mm-hmm.
crazy? And essentially, the deities, gods, deities. They
God.
say the gods. Semantics at this point. They became too dangerous, too powerful, too unpredictable, too much of a threat, just like you. And then comes the realization of her saying, like, they hurt my heart, mate, and he was like, did they though? It's like, did they though? And he goes, if you don't believe that, you can trust the marriage imprint. And she comes to the realization that she didn't even think to look at that.
Which, to be fair, that being so new with everything going on, that wouldn't have been on my mind either. Like I've had it for like what, a few days. Like that, I wouldn't be like, oh, let me look at my gold hand. Like,
It's fair, but also if I was panicking and I'm like, where's my husband? I would feel like I would go through a checklist of things like that
I
I
don't
could
think the
check.
ether let her. The ether took control, and she was like, "Nah, this
That's
feels good. Let's just roll with it."
that's fine. She even says, I believe that Castile had been gravely injured, if not killed. I wouldn't have stopped. Not until I sated that need for vengeance, and I had no idea what it would have taken for that to happen. And then and then the person she's talking to says the bones nullify the primal notum. Notum? Notum, yeah. They also
Yeah.
negate any and all abilities, reducing you to what you are at your very core, mortal.
So
And then,
basically, the Wolven can't feel her. She can't reach out to them.
yeah, like she can't communicate, she can't anything. They can't. Ugh,
Might as
so
well be the
tragic.
maiden again. She's so like helpless at this point.
And then we find out who she's talking to.
Ugh, Commander Jansen.
Ass monkey.
Oh,
I hate her. Or hate him. Sorry. Yeah, y'all can enjoy my show notes if you're part of our Patreon group. Uh
hmm
yeah, and then she learns that he's a changeling and he changes
hmm
into Beckett at the
Yep.
end of this chapter.
And you're like, that would throw me off. I'd be like, are you Jansen? Are you Beckett? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, at first I was like, wait, is Beckett a changeling? And that just like what? And then I got really confused and then it even goes
Oh,
whatever. I
and
just
then
my
you go
brain
from
hurt.
confused to angry when you find out like
Yeah.
what he did to Beckett.
Yeah,
Oh,
so Jansen's a changeling and as you know,
he's talking about it, what's going on. And she's like, she's so mad. She's like, what about what happened? What happened to Beckett? And he's like, oh, he wasn't supposed to get hurt. But because he's a wolven, the stuff we gave him wore off too quickly, and we kind of had to do what had to be done. And she's like, dude, he's just a kid. And he says it
yeah.
wasn't something any of us enjoyed, but it had to be done.
He was a kid and he was innocent and you know Poppy and you love that she, really is passionate about innocent people, so she's even more mad now.
And he's just like, innocents die all the time. But the end justified the means. The people of Atlantia will understand that. And it's like, you don't know anything about Atlantia if you think that. Like, you say you're protecting it, but do you know it? Like, hello? Anyways, bitch ass.
Anyway, I hate that man.
Yep.
And she's like, what's the big deal? Like, I have a drop of God's blood in me, and he laughs and he goes, a drop, girl. I know what you did in that temple. You need to give yourself more credit. Oh, and he calls her a girl, and she goes, I haven't been a girl in years, so do not call me one. Oh,
Yeah.
I love her so much. She ain't taking no shit. And then he claims to be a true guardian of Atlantia. And I'm just like, heh. And even Poppy's like, I thought of the women who had descended from a long line of warriors, women who had leapt from the rise surrounding Spess's end and wielded swords more fearlessly than I'd ever seen the commander do. I laughed harshly. You're pale and pathetic compared to the guardians.
And then he had to hit her because that's what
Yeah,
weak
well.
men do when someone says a girl is stronger than you.
Accurate.
Anyways.
And he says, but if you insult me one more time, I will not be responsible for my actions. And she says, an icy hot feeling flowed over my skin. My cheek throbbed as I turned my head back to him, met his gaze, and said, you will die. It will be by my hand, and it will be a death befitting a coward like you. And then he hit her again because, well,
Yeah.
he's him and she's a badass.
I love
Uh,
how like people like that are like, I won't be like this happens later too. at the end of the book with a different baddie that we also hate. But they're like, "Oh, you're forcing me to do this," and I'm like,
I really enjoy that we allude to what happens at the end, even though we know that people
I
hopefully
know.
by this point have finished the
Like,
book.
okay, fine. Him and the queen are both like, I hate that you're making me do this. And I'm like, that's the most cop-out thing ever, to blame other people for the decisions you're making. Like, just admit that you're the one doing it. Like, don't hide behind what other people are doing.
Exactly. And he's like, or she was like, you were forced to use the power in your blood against others. Like, yeah, she used her powers because they were hurting innocent people. Like, what do you
Yeah, she
mean?
was protecting her family. Like, what did you want her to do?
But essentially Alistair gives her a history lesson that I respectfully, the dialogue that Alistair shares makes me upset. But essentially, the gods acted as their protectors, aiding them in times of crisis and even granted favors to the most faithful, but they also acted as the mortal's judge, jury, and executioner if the mortal's actions were deemed offensive or unwarranted. The problem with that was that only the gods chose what was and wasn't a punishable act. Like, I get this. So, you live for thousands of years. Like, I can
Yeah,
understand you're getting restless, so they went to sleep.
but I would
Is any
love a
of
nap if I lived that long. Like,
honestly. Um, the deities built Atlantia, but they almost destroyed it in their greed and through their thirst for life, their unquenchable desire for more. Always more, they knew no limits. I mean, mood. Hey, that's the thing that I really didn't like about this whole arc, I guess, of the book, is it's
mhm.
like, which I get it, it's very like relatable in terms of, what happens, but how are you going to punish some girl that was groomed from birth to do your bidding, and then she's finally just protecting innocent people, and you're gonna punish her for just existing? Like, that's
Couldn't kill her
disrespectful.
as a child, so now he has to do it now. I mean,
Just whatever. And then we learn that Malik could heal wounds with his touch, but he rarely did it, because he was not only descended from the god of life, he was also a descendant of the god of death, Daddy Niktos. I'm sorry, I added the daddy in there at the end. The
I've
king of
added
gods
daddy
as
in
well.
my notes too, so
Um, and then he has the audacity to say, I like you. I know you may not believe that, and I understand if you don't, but I'm sorry because I know that Castile
oh.
cares for you deeply.
I want to throw up just reading that sentence.
Oh, no,
But that is
exactly.
the blood you carry in you, Penelope. You are descended from Nyctos, who carry the blood of King Malik inside you. I have to get myself to say Malik. I hate it, but I have to.
Apparently Malik had many mistresses as well, and she's the descendant. And he goes on to say, with the last chosen blood spilled, the great conspirator birthed from the flesh and fire of the primals will awaken as the harbinger and the bringer of death and destruction to the lands gifted by the gods. Beware, for the end will come from the west to destroy the east and lay waste to all which lies between, which is some prophecy.
Which at the time, no one
There's
believes in prophecies. Like they're like, oh, they're just kind of bulls crock. Like,
Bolsa Croc. Is that supposed
listen,
to be? Is that supposed to be crock of shit or bullshit?
listen, they're bowls full of crock shit. Okay, we'll just go with that. I don't know. Um,
And she even goes, "You're doing all of this because of my bloodline and a prophecy?" Like, I
mm.
want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but
I just would like to say that here we are in book 3, and no one still knows what Poppy is. Like they're still like trying to piece it together. They go through being like, "Oh, you're the child of a deity. Oh, you are a deity. Oh, you're like a god." Like it's just, and even in the 4th book, they're still trying to piece it together. And that's what I like, is that it's actually a puzzle that you're trying to work through and be like, "Oh, does this work?" It's not just a here's what you are, that's it for the rest of the book. Like she's continually figuring out who she is, and that kind of keeps things interesting.
exactly. And then she learns that Alistair knew her parents and that her mother was the favorite maiden of
Mhm.
the quote unquote counterfeit queen, and that they should have known better and to not say what Poppy was, and it was all their fault, blah blah blah.
So that was something they kind
Uh,
of got right in the beginning of thinking, oh, Alistair could have helped them get out. He did try to help them get out, but then her
but he also
parents were
left her to
like,
die.
well, yeah, because her parents were like, oh, we need to get her to safety. Here's what we could do. And he went from, let me help these people to, oh, this might be a child of Malik. Gotta kill him.
Dumb.
Okay.
And then he says they were craven that night, you carry their scars. And then he says that the dark one led them there, which
She's
everybody
like,
knows that Cass is
is
quote
the
unquote
dark
the
one.
dark one, but Cass wasn't there. Um, so
I
then we're
never said
left with
Castile
like,
did
huh?
it. Oh,
Yeah,
it's
and then
just
we're
he
like,
says, I
huh?
never said Castile did it.
And I'm just like, he's like, I know it wasn't him, and I'm just like, all right, well, I don't know who else it could be. Excuse you.
Yeah.
So we're just full of Alistair's lies and deceit and asshole
Can't trust anything he
ish.
says.
And then we learn that Alistair can no longer shift into his wolven form because he broke his oath to King Malik, and that severed the connection between himself
Good
and the wolven
riddance.
line, which good because we like the wolven and we don't like you.
Can you imagine
Um,
how different that would be though if he didn't break that bond and so he was Wolven and he had these plans, but now he was like
she could
bonded to
command
her?
him though.
Yeah.
That's wild.
But
My brain
yeah.
cannot compute that. Um, So then that chapter ends with, if you're not going to kill me or leave me in here to die, I'm a little confused what the plan is. And he's like, I will
hmm
give the Ascended what they were so desperate to keep. I will give them you. And I'm just like
Which is like,
really
what?
round. Like we're just going around in circles at this point. Yeah, and you
Yeah.
probably are thinking, this is getting exhausting to follow. Like this is obnoxious. Please, he needs to go away.
Oh, this is perfect to go into my whiplash of this book. Like,
Yeah, go for
guys,
it.
we are in chapter 5 and so much has happened. Like, I had to write down like my whiplash to make sure I got it right. But this book, you go from bowing before the queen, Kieran versus Castile, attacked, kidnapped, betrayal, saved, arrow, ascended, not ascended, back to Atlantia, attacked, back to Solus, back to Atlantia, Elysium, back to Solus, betrayal, captured, angry Poppy, back to Atlantia, pop off, back to Elysium, back to Solus again. Like, it's just, it exhausts me thinking of all the traveling they had to do in this book.
Between the traveling and like the I listen, this book just is a great precursor to the next book.
It really is. Yeah.
Um, but then we go into chapter 5 and Alistair's like, Penelope, do you not think like they knew what you were from the start? Um, and then she thinks about Ian and she's just like, I was told Ian ascended, and Alistair's just like, I would have no knowledge of that.
Mm.
Um, so now she's like trying to figure out like who like what's true of her family at this point, because homegirl is so
Yeah.
confused. I think she has as much whiplash as the rest of us. And then Alistair reveals that he is part of a brotherhood that has risen once more. Um and or he's part of a brotherhood, but the brotherhood is not responsible and they won't like that he was a part of it. And
So
he
basically,
convinced
brotherhood
himself.
is equal to cult.
Exactly. And he like is off the beaten path clearly, but he is convinced that he'll convince them that he was in the right. And I'm just like, and she goes, you're staging a coup? And he's like, no, I'm saving Atlantia. And at this point, if you think that this man is saving Atlantia, you're
How do you
delulu.
save Atlantia by working with the enemy to give them what they want?
And this
Like,
goes deep. Like we go through this whole book and he really screwed them. Screwed them.
yeah.
And he goes, this is the part that even pisses me off more. He says, you would have been good for Castile, but you never would have been my daughter. No one wants to be your daughter, my
Yeah,
dude.
that part always confused me. Like, where
Like,
did
yeah, you
he
wanted your daughter to marry Castile, but like respectfully, Poppy's better. I don't know, Shay, but she's a traitorous bitch. Disrespectfully, period. Stab it.
Yeah.
Stick it into him. Um, anyway. So then Poppy is unraveling his plan, unraveling his true intentions. Like, why is Alistair doing this to begin with? And she learns essentially that he wants to still have influence. That
hmm
the king or queen essentially chooses the advisor, which he is to the current king and queen. And if when Cass and Poppy, take the throne, they can choose a new advisor, which wouldn't be him. He wouldn't have any say because Shay is not the queen. And he's like, I'm not gonna have any influence. I need a little in and I need to manipulate every single person because I'm a dingle.
Yep. And I mean, he should have known she would have caught on to this. She grew up around the politics of the Ascended. Like, she knows what power hungry people look like. So that's why she was able to pick up so quickly of like, wait, your daughter, now your great niece, your advisor to the king queen, but you won't be once we take place, so you don't want us here. Like,
And he wants war.
yep.
And Poppy and Castile do not want war. They want to do everything they can to prevent it. So he very much is just like, yeah, I want to still, have some
She
sort
says
of
it right
say
here. She
here.
says, so you're not a supporter of Castile's plan. You want blood, but more importantly, you want the influence to get what you want. And you see that power slipping through your fingers, even though I haven't made a single claim to the crown. And he's like, it doesn't matter if you want the crown or not. So long as you live, it's yours. It's your birthright. And the Wolven will ensure that it becomes yours. Just like it was Castile's. It doesn't matter if you detest the responsibility as much as the prince does. And yeah, so he goes basically to agree with her of like, yeah, it was your guys's, and as long as you're alive, it's gonna be yours. I can't have that.
Yeah, and what really catches me is that he also says, I would rather see a war among my people than have the crown sit upon your head and you unleashed upon Atlantia. Like, he's had conversations with this girl. Like, I don't understand in what world he thinks that she is.
He's the Lulu.
Yeah, but not in
Like,
the good way.
no, not in the good way. And they show that later, like when they're talking about all the when it really comes to light throughout the whole book, Alistair gets mentioned a lot, and you see how much he really went behind their back and like betrayed them. It just shows you that he would have never saw logic even if it was shoved up his ass. Like it would
Correct.
have just he was so far into thinking this that it didn't matter at that point.
Yeah, and he is so set in his plans. He really just tried to do the most. And Poppy is now like trying to process the fact that her parents knew the truth about the Ascended. They were trying to escape, but like, did they know it from the start? Did they not? Like I'm King Malik's descendant. Like, what is happening? Like, I don't understand. Like, I was just a mortal girl, and then I was the chosen, and then I was blessed, and then I was the maiden, and now I'm a descendant of a god, and I can't breathe, and my
I'm
brain
supposed to be queen.
just like
Ugh.
it was crazy. And then so they finish this conversation, and she decides that she's gonna eat some food. Listen
She's like,
here,
I
puppy
need my
girl.
strength. I need to escape here. So let me drink this water, eat the food,
And
and
big
then
homegirl was drugged.
yeah, and decided to take a nap instead.
Yeah, and my show notes say cover your drinks and don't accept things from assholes or sussy people.
Yep. Don't care
And
how
that's
much strength you need. Don't accept it from the enemy.
correct.
Yep.
So she wakes up chapter 6 and she's in the wastelands.
And they're
Uh,
like, ah, shit, she's waking up. She shouldn't have been waking up, but she's still chained. So it doesn't matter.
correct.
Yep.
Yeah, so then she sees her BFF Jansen and he doesn't really like her talking, so he gags her
Oh,
respectfully, disrespectfully. Um anyway, so then they meet up and Jansen's like the gag, well, she was being quite rude. I suggest you keep that one on for as long as possible.
Me sentence like, oh,
uh,
she appears calm now. And they're still like talking to her like she's chained up in bones. And they're like, it'll be okay, maiden. We'll take you home where you belong. Your queen is so very. But
Big
then she
dead.
can't finish her sentence because
Our Bay.
uh here comes
Bay
something
Delano.
large and white. leaping into the line of sight. Our lovely
And
Delano.
we love
Oh,
Delano. So
I love
Delano
that he was
comes
the first one
through.
seen in this moment. Oh,
I
love
love
Delano.
that Cass has Kieran and Poppy has Delano.
Yep.
This makes me so happy. But Delano shows up, Kieran shows up, and Poppy's like, Castile, and he's, fighting, kicking
Currently
ass.
disemboweling some idiots in a goddamn dissenter mask.
Yep. And it turns out that Cass's father's here, and
Mm-hmm.
she is shocked that he
Yep.
is there fighting to free her. And even Jasper's there, with Niall and Emil.
Yeah, I like
And
how Kieran says, I think my father's currently venting his anger by tearing through the Ascendant with Nail and Emil. It looks like
mood.
Castile's father's doing the same.
It's so crazy. And she's like shocked that people are helping her.
Yeah.
Like, girlfriend, please, people love you.
I would be
Um,
shocked by the king helping as well, though. Like, after what happened and stuff,
oh,
that would
100%.
definitely, like, throw me off.
That's and then Poppy goes to attempt to alert Kieran, and he, in italicized again, was there. And Kieran's like, he's a little angry, and Poppy goes, a little.
I
Kieran
mean,
goes,
he just
he's really
ripped out
angry.
someone's spine, so. And he's like, oh,
Um,
he's really angry.
and
And she's like,
she
I
goes,
love him.
love him.
He's like, are you just now figuring that out?
That's
Oh.
freaking crazy. And she's like, how long have they had me? And he goes, 6 days and 8 hours. And I'm like, oh, he's counting. It's so cute.
Mhm.
And she's like, they kept me chained to a wall of a crypt full of the remains of deities. They drugged me and planned to hand me over to the Ascended. I'm not sitting this one out. And he goes, of
Of
course
course
not.
not. Oh,
Listen,
but then she
I wouldn't either.
remembers everything that Alistair said to her. And she's like feeling the ether and all this stuff. And she wants to help. But then she remembers saying, him saying, you are dangerous now, but you'll become something else entirely later. And she wanted that too much to like kill and do things. And then she was like, I'm not a monster. And Kieran's like, what? And she decides, I'm sitting this out. I can't do it. I need to like let you guys handle it. Until
I think that is a
the
pivotal moment, though.
yeah, oh
I
yeah.
think that shows so much restraint and her essentially just proving what we already knew. Like she's not a danger to anybody, and she has
Hmm.
control, and
Yeah.
she's just better until
But
you
in
get to
true
Jansen.
Poppy fashion, it lasted a whole 2 seconds.
You know.
And then she saw Jansen, and I love this part. She said, Castile, stop. He halted, his chest rising and falling with his heavy breaths as he leveled his sword at Jensen. Later, I would marvel over the fact that he had stopped without hesitation, without question. I walked forward. I made him a promise. I thought you were sitting this one out, Kieran stated. I am, but he's different.
And he is indeed. And so
Oh, the betrayal to Cassian now. Or Cassian? Ooh, different book shift, guys. Castile. Oh.
anyway, moving on up. Um yeah, and he's Cass is just sitting there trying to comfort her and be like, "Are you okay? I'm so."
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
She told him, she's like, you remember what I promised you? She said, I keep my promises. And he
And
said,
he
as
says,
do
as do
I.
I. Oh, and I can't, this whole chapter just pissed me off. I was just
Mm.
like, anyway, so then she gets hit
Yep. She says,
by
without
a
warning,
bow.
something jerked me back with such force that fiery pain erupted in my chest. I lost my grip on the sword. The movement was so sudden. Time stopped. People were still moving. I saw a flash of Jasper as he leapt onto a protector's back. Saw the crossbow, and she says, slowly I looked down, red, so much red everywhere. A bolt protruded from my chest.
For fuck's
No
sake.
breaks, guys. No
No,
breaks.
no breaks. Chapter 7,
Jennifer
she's
Jennifer
freaking
really like took out the brakes of her car and said, we're just full full pedal
downhill.
going. Yeah,
Just downhill.
no
Crazy.
breaks.
But chapter 7, she's bleeding out and she's all like Castillo in her weakened state, because she's sitting there bleeding out all over the cold hard
Mhm.
floor. And Cass is like, I've got you, and like they can't take the bolt out, and they're like trying to figure out what to do. And
And
in the
his
end,
dad is like, "Oh, you got to let her go." And
Cass is
honey,
like,
that's
fuck
not
off.
helpful. Like,
This is the third book. We got more to read. Anyway,
yeah,
so essentially, he ascends her.
yep.
No big deal.
Normal, just a normal
No,
day.
casual. And Kieran is just like,
Oh, he's a
Cass asks
roll,
Kieran, he's
bro.
like, I need you to pull the bolt out. I can't. He's like, I need you. I can't do that. And Kieran's like, you're going to, fuck yeah, okay, let's do that.
Like, he doesn't even question. He's like, "I'm here. Let's go." Like even Jasper like gets over Poppy and growls at like Valen. Like I just love how they're like, "I'm with you. Let's do it."
And Cass is like, the gods will not stop me either. Because his father's trying to talk him out of it. And it's just like, nope, nope, nope. And then
Mhm.
we get such a love, so full of
He
emotion.
says, "I love you" for the first time.
He says, I love you, Penelope. Your fierce heart, your intelligence and strength. I love your endless capacity for kindness. I love your acceptance of me, your understanding. I'm in love with you, and I will be in love with you when I take my last breath and then beyond in the veil. But I have no plans to enter the veil anytime soon, and I will not lose you, ever. I love you, princess, and even if you hate me for what I'm about to do, I will spend the rest of our lives making up for it.
I love how at the end she's like, "Oh God, she's gonna ascend me." Like, homegirl's barely holding on.
She's like conscious, she's like not conscious, but she's like conscious, like she can hear, she knows what's going
Uh-huh.
on, and she's just like, oh shit, everything
And
is
so I
about
guess
to
this is
change.
something like because I put in the notes. So yeah, so he was doing this, and it's like I get he's morally gray. Do you agree with him doing this, knowing that they knew at the time, thinking she would be a vampire and she wouldn't want to be one? Like that's a very morally gray situation right there.
Okay, so hear me out. I've also watched The Vampire Diaries.
I hear great logic
And
coming.
if I had a man like Damon, okay, no, hear me out. If I
Mm-hmm.
if I had the love of my life and I was losing them and there was something I could do, I would do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just me. I will say I wouldn't destroy the cure, or I wouldn't like because in the Vampire Diaries there's a cure. Spoiler. But like I wouldn't destroy that or hinder you from essentially reversing it if that's an option. But if there was a chance for me to save you, like I'm gonna do it. And I would deal with the repercussions later. I don't know.
I
That's
like it.
just
It's
me.
like Kieran said earlier in the chapter, he's like, "We'll handle whatever comes next together." Yeah, I
Exactly.
like it. Love it.
Anyway, so then she
Then she
guess
dies.
gets ascended.
Yep.
I was saying she gets ascended. You straight up said she dies. And
Well,
then we move
she
into chapter
did. Like
8.
her heart stopped.
Baby, keep my heart beep 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 beating. Anyway, chapter 8. Nothing but a warm and empty darkness with the sweet, comforting scent of lilacs.
Mhm.
So
She's going
she's,
kind of in and out of consciousness right now.
yeah, in and out of consciousness. And Kieran's like, she's going to wake eventually, and you know what will happen. You won't be able to take care of her. Would you like Nile? Now I feel like I'm saying names completely wrong. Thank you for
Hey, I
that.
still have the guide open. Let's see what
Nope.
it says.
Or a meal to service you, or would you prefer that they service?
Nile.
And he's like, Nile, thank you. Nile, he barks, get Nile, damn it. And then he's like, rest, I'll watch over both of you. What a gem of what a gem. I was gonna say of a human, but he's not human. So then Poppy's like having flashbacks of her younger years and during this whole ascension time,
'Cause
and
that's what we want is to be remembered of all that.
traumatic memories.
Uh-huh.
That's really what you want. Um, and then she said she in this whole recollection, she said, and then I was above the colors in nothingness once again, but I wasn't alone. A woman was there, her hair long and floating around her, the color so pale it was spun like moonlight. Sound familiar, anyone? Her features
It's
were
like she's seen her
familiar.
before.
I'd seen her before in my mind while in the temple, but now I thought she looked a bit like me. There were freckles across the bridge of her nose and on her cheeks. Her eyes were the color of dew-kissed grass, but behind the pupils there was a light, a silvery white glow that seeped out, fracturing the vibrant green. Her lips moved and she spoke. Her lashes swept down and a tear fell from the corner of one eye, a blood-red tear. Sound familiar, anyone? Her words sent a jolt of icy shock through me, but then she was gone, and so was I.
But we don't
Anyone
know what
know
the words are, guys. What were the words?
what were the
Sorry, you'll have
words?
to wait a month to find out.
You don't have to wait a month. You just have to wait a month for us to discuss.
Yeah, that's true. Get to reading. Oh,
And so then she wakes up and she's starving, and not that kind of starving for like a full course, 6-course meal, but she's starving for
she's
that.
on that liquid diet starve.
Yeah, she's on that liquid diet. And then she tries to rip Kieran's head off, or whatever, eat him,
Yes.
whatever. Same difference.
Yes. Threw
Same.
herself on him. And
Yes.
Castile comes in saying, "You don't want him. He won't be as tasty. You want me."
And during this whole thing, Kieran still feels the Nottum, so
Yeah.
that's something to note. Um, and her eyes are still green, and we're just like, what the heck is this girl? Like, she ascended, but she's
Mhm.
not ascended. Like, what is happening?
Yeah. I like how he
Um,
says, "I know you're hungry, but you can't eat Kieran." That would make me a little sad.
mood. Um, and
This poor girl's trying to eat, and he's like, "Let me look at your eyes," and she's like, "Let me have your blood." It's a great moment.
then
And then
there's
we all
some
know what
intensity.
happens with
Yeah,
drinking
well,
blood
yeah. So there was
Mm.
intense moments. And
with Kieran
Castile's
there.
apologizing, and he just, I'm in awe of you. Like, he's just being sweet. He's just trying to talk her
Mhm.
off a ledge, and she's just like, I'm hungry. Let me.
She's hangry, guys. Let the woman eat.
For real. And
Uh,
and then I really like this part where he says he's talking about how brave she is, and he says, "You've chosen things for yourself longer than you realize, Poppy, longer than you give yourself credit for. You always did when it mattered the most, and did so knowing the consequences. Because you're brave, you were never the maiden, you were never truly helpless. You were smart, strong, and brave." And I just think that that's in like a great little tidbit.
yep.
I just want Castile to say all these things to me. You know what I'm saying?
Seriously. And then the blood
Um,
really takes effect, and they're doing other stuff.
yeah. We're just gonna y'all
And
can
then
read that.
Kieran stop. And then Kieran pops up in the middle of this, being like, "Okay, you gotta stop." And I was just
Yes.
like, I was like, "Oh yeah, Kieran's still there." He always finds himself in these fun situations with them. It's great.
Yes, then he gets her off, and then she's like, "Oh yes, Hawk's blood." She even says Hawk's blood first, and then she says Castile's blood. And well, she was talking about how she trusts him and how she wanted acceptance, and just listen, she's going through a wild roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah,
Um, And then she's like spiraling into like, oh shit, like am I gonna have to feed all the time? It
yeah.
could take years for Ascended to control their bloodlust or their thirst, and I'm just like, girl, I need you to breathe.
Yeah, but then she's confused because she's like, I can still feel my emotions. Like, what?
Yes,
They shouldn't feel emotions like I'm feeling. Like,
and then she's like, am I dreaming? Am I not? And then she's just like, Castile.
in the first in chapter 9, first thing she says, "Is this real?" Her and her questions, guys.
And then, well, more stuff that you can just read yourself if you want us to read that. That is not the kind of podcast we
If
are
you
going
want
for.
us to read that, that will be Patreon only.
Honestly, though, that's tracks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's like crazy in love. He saved me, and she's like, because he loved me, and like, same girl, same.
Oh, and then
Um,
she tells him she loves him too. And he's
and
shocked by this.
he's yes, and honestly, that is I'm in the show notes. I
Valid.
literally put the sappiest chapter in all the land, and he goes on this whole thing. He's like, I knew you cared for me, but love, I just didn't know if you could after everything. I wouldn't have blamed you if you were unable to feel that for me. Not after what? And she cuts him off and says, it doesn't matter what was done in the past. I understand why you did those things. I've moved past that. I love you. I would do anything for you, Cass, like you did for me. Anything. See, this is why it's like morally
Oh,
gray, but like if your love is strong enough, it don't matter. Um, and they
and she
just have a
called him
great bonding
Cass, and he's
moment.
in love with that because only those closest to him know that.
Exactly.
Um,
And he says, I never knew it could feel like this, that I could feel this for someone, but I do. I love you. No, she says that.
and then it gets sappy again.
So much
And then they
saps.
say, you are the foundation that helps me stand. You're my walls and my roof, my shelter. You are my home.
Yeah. And then she like comes to eventually and she's just like, oh shit, I tried to eat Kieran. And Cass is like, he won't hold it against you. And I'm like, I tried to eat Kieran while I was naked. And he goes, that's probably why he won't hold it against you. And
Speaking of
homegirl,
naked,
then homegirl just decides to expose herself to the sun because, the Ascended can't go in the sunlight. So
because
she
instead
exposes
of
herself to the
talking
sun.
about it, she's like, let me bolt to this door, throw it open, give Cass a heart attack,
And Flash
realize they
Delano.
can't have heart attacks, and then see Delano sitting there with his head tilted to the side. She's like, oh my god, I'm naked. And he's like, very sorry about that. And then you just hear him laughing.
And
uh
then she comes to the realization like she did die, so they don't know what's going on.
mhm.
And then while they were feeding, she mentions like how was I able to see Cass like your memories to Cass? And he says it can happen when two Atlanteans feed. Each can pick up on memories. I think that's what happened. And
Love
this
it.
is crazy. And that the sappy chapter in all the land is all I gotta
The
say about that.
sappiest chapter, and I love it. It was a great moment for their relationship. She's not ascended. They said I love you. Big firsts were happening there. Delano saw her naked. Like it was a great. Kieran saw them literally have sex. Like it's
It
fine.
is what it
Everything was
is.
fine.
Normal friends, apparently. And then we go right into chapter 10 where they're gonna debrief everything that happened and to no one's
Oh,
surprise,
she has questions.
she has questions. Kieran comes in and he's like, how are you feeling? She's like, a little confused. I have a lot of questions. And Kieran goes, I'm so shocked.
I think what's so sweet though is realizing that Kieran cleaned both of them like up when they were both kind of out of it with him from giving her blood and her from dying. He's like, it didn't feel right leaving either of you lay in your blood. I didn't want either of you seeing that when you woke up. And I'm just like, Kieran's like, he's the best. I freaking love him for that. Ugh. And then
Yes.
she
And then
hugged him and he's like, oh,
this is,
I
crazy.
love him.
I love him too. So then she's like getting clarification, like, is the bond really gone between the two of you? And um she's like debriefing them and um Kieran explains that when the gods gave the Kiyu, now every pronunciation I'm gonna doubt now, mortal form, we were bonded to them and their children on an instinctual level that is passed down generation after generation, and that instinctive bond recognizes you.
Yeah, you got it right.
And
Kiyu.
I try. And she's like, but I'm not a deity, so like I'm confusion. Um,
Mm,
and she's
mm.
like, I'm just Poppy, blood of the gods or not. And Castile's like, you're not just Poppy, that has nothing to do with you not becoming a vampire. And I mean it, princess. I can say for sure that you're not some sort of deity. What I saw you do, what I've seen and heard that you have done, you're unlike any of us, and I still can't believe I didn't put it together when I first saw that light around you. And Poppy goes, is that why you said I smelled like death? And Kieran corrects her and said, I said you smelled of death. And death is power, the old kind. And she's confused. She's like, death and life are two sides of the same coin. Nyktos he's the god of life and death. And this explains why you thought her blood tasted old. This is wild, dude. There's so
Mm.
much like context and so much detail, like down to the drop of blood and the taste of blood and
Yeah.
the sense. Like I think it's very detailed in that way.
This is one of those times, the section right here, that knowing what we know of what comes next, I read it and I'm like, oh, they're so close. I'm not gonna say why, but they're so close.
They're doing the Lord's work. It's fine.
They really are.
Um, is this where he says, um,
They
this
say her
chapter's just a
blood tastes
whirlwind.
ancient.
Yes. And this is where, is this the chapter? Or is it the
They're
next
making
chapter?
sense
That's
now of
this
like
one,
why
yeah.
everyone felt the shocks of static when they touched her and why they thought they could hear her. Um,
This
and
girl's
it's
still feeling bad for this whole bond being over, and this just cracks me up.
yeah. And I love that I love what Castile. I had to think of names in my head. How he helps her and he's just like she's like he's my best friend and Kieran's like I still am. But my loyalty to Cass has never been about a bond. Like that's not why I'm loyal to him. And I'm just going to protect both of you now. He's like most of us have fostered friendships that can break. So we just made room for you.
Yeah,
And Kieran
cutest
and
freaking thing.
Castiel's like, why can I be mad knowing the limits Kieran will go to ensure you remain safe? Like it's like they're so sweet about it. Like our cute little thruple. But they're
I
not,
love
but
them.
that's what I call them.
I wish, I mean, oh, I
Mhm.
wish. Anyway, they so then they go into talking about like deities and gods and like Poppy's just low-key trying to process everything and Castiel's explaining deities and like lifespans and he's like you think an Atlantean's lifespan is unthinkable but a deity is like a god, they are immortal. Instead of living 3,000 years they live double and triple that. Living
Oh.
that long would make anyone apathetic or bored, impatient and intolerant. They simply grew too old and became too cold, because he was talking about how the deities,
Mm-hmm.
they got bored. That,
Kind of reiterating what Alistair was telling her.
ass Listar, yes, ass Listar.
Mhm.
And then
um,
Poppy starts to panic and she's like, wait, am I immortal?
yeah.
What a realization to come to,
I know,
honestly.
thinking about this, like, oh, okay, wait a minute. Oh,
Wait a
man.
damn minute. Um, and so we go into chapter 11, and Cass is just like, all I know is I took whatever blood you had in your body and gave you mine, and it was my blood that restarted your heart, and it kept it beating, and it was my blood that fed your body. There isn't a drop of mortal blood in you.
What a thought
And
to have of like, oh,
yeah,
so I'm.
and he says, you
Mm.
don't feel mortal to me either. And I'm just like, oh? And Kieran's like, you don't feel that way to me either, and you don't smell mortal any longer. And she's like, what do I feel like? What do I smell like? Do I smell more like death? And he goes, I wish I never said that. And Kieran goes, you smell of more power, absolute final. I've never smelled anything like it. And you
His
don't feel
homeboy's
like
just
an
out here sniffing her.
Atlantean or ascended. I've never felt anything like you before. I don't know if that means you feel like a deity. Wild. And then he's like, my parents would know, maybe even Jasper. Um, So this whirlwind, and she's, trying to process the fact that she is probably immortal.
Oh, and they even said, I don't know if you'll continue to need blood. And I would be like, that's hard to fathom. Like, mm.
Um, and then of course we go into a history lesson of like if Wolven were bonded to the deities, like why didn't they protect them?
Yeah.
And he was like, many Kieran says that many did and many died in the process. And not all deities were killed. There were several left after the war, ones who had no interest in ruling. The Wolven became very protective of them. And then it turns out that Cass's ancestor
Was the first to be
was,
bonded.
yes, was the first to be bonded. And
Special child.
Nyktos himself, along with Theon and Layla, the god of accord and war and the goddess of peace and vengeance. They spoke with the Wolven, and no idea what was said, but and then they were bonded.
Mm-hmm.
And
Then Kieran gets all
uh
sweet.
yeah, you're not a monster, not today, not tomorrow, not an eternity from now, if that is the case. And she could taste his sincerity. And I highlighted this because I was like, I wonder what sincerity tastes like. Because
I
she
have
doesn't
to
really
find a
go
list
into,
of tastes, yeah.
yeah, she doesn't really
Go
go
to
into
your local
detail.
guidebook for answers.
honestly though. Um, and then it is time. It is time.
Then she finds out, is this where she finds out that oh my gosh, we didn't like highlight anything in this part.
No, I know. She
Yeah, this
finds
is
out that Alistair's still alive and they were saving
yep.
him for her, and um
What a gift, murder. I
what a
love it.
what a gift. But
And he
I'm
said,
so
he's all yours, Poppy.
I love that. Um I just cracks me up with all of these highlights. Um and so then they approach the king and they want some answers, obviously, and he's like, I will not talk without
Mm-hmm.
um my queen by my side. And I was just like, I don't understand, but like, okay, I guess. I guess it's more because it's her story to tell, which honestly, like, that makes more sense.
Yeah, you
But
can
it's
see where Castile gets the protecting your spouse from. He sees that like his father's like, no, I'm not gonna do this without my other half here. Like, you protect yours, I protect mine.
and then Cass and Poppy, like Poppy's freaking out because it's just like I don't think your parents are gonna like me. Like, you know, my descendant betrayed your mother, and it's just and Cass is just like, that's not you. That's not like you had no control over the actions of other people. And I'm just like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
I just love them and their relationship. It's so great.
And you
And
even
then they,
highlighted it. Oh,
yeah. What
I
did
was
I
gonna say
highlight?
you highlighted it here. It may be a shock to her. It may even make her think of things she's worked hard to forget, but she'll not hold you responsible for what someone distantly related to you did. And that's a legitimate fear to have because she was married to King Malik. So then to see her son married to someone who they think is his daughter, like that would be a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, honestly. Um, and I don't know why I even highlighted this part. Um, and so they're still trying to figure. They don't know why they asked, but they don't know why she didn't ascend. And then she keeps thinking about Ian and that Ian might not be her brother. And they're like, all right, it's time to go figure out some answers.
Mm-hmm.
And she lifts herself onto the horse by herself. And
Yep.
everyone's like shocked. And Cass is just like, you just hoisted yourself onto settee. And she's like, so? And Kieran's like, you didn't use the stirrup. And I was like, and she's like, what?
No, of
Are you
course I
sure?
did.
And then they go into a whole hit me like you mean it.
And
And,
and she's like, I'm not gonna hit you. So here comes the diary talk again. Miss Willa
uh,
pops up.
yep. And then she punches Castile and and she hits him hard. And Kieran's like, I told you she was strong. And
And then I actually didn't hit you as hard as I could. Well, damn.
yeah, and she's like, "Don't ask me to hit you again. I'm not going to do it." And like, honestly, I don't blame her.
And then
And
he
he
was
gets
turned
turned
on.
on. Yes, no one's surprised.
Listen, he's a little masochist. She's a bit exhibitionist. They would. I want to see their BDSM test results. Honestly,
I think she would be
honest.
too shy to take it. Well, it depends on which book which Poppy we're referencing. But
It's fair.
it's fine. And then she just gets used to, all the nakedness and it's fine.
Yep.
Um and so they're traveling and um they're like, oh, the trees were kind of
Oh
deformed,
yeah.
the limbs twisting downward. And she's like, were the trees always this? And Cass was like, they were like that when we arrived at the cabin, but they never looked like that before. And they're like, a hell of a storm must have come through. And she was eager to see the golden trees of Ios. And so they look up after they, you know, clear the mist, and the golden trees of
And the mist
Ios had
scattered for
become,
them too.
yes, and the golden trees had become blood trees.
Oh, that would poor golden trees. I feel like those would be so pretty, but yeah, that would be very unnerving to like get through. The mist scatters just from entering it, and it's like, Oh, okay. And then you look up and it's red above you.
That's wild. And so we get into chapter 12. And something that like consistently bugs me until we find out is who is the dark one in her dream. Because clearly she's been told multiple times, or she's like between the nightmares, flashbacks, and Alistair and all that, like clearly there was someone else there. Like, who is it? What is happening? Um, and she can't decipher like what's real, what was like a dream, what was hallucination. I guess I don't really think that they really discuss hallucinations really,
Hmm.
um but she's putting together that the woman she saw looked like her. She just was slightly different. Um, and the fact that, a blood tear was going down her cheek, like, meant she had to be a god. Like, what's the tea? Like, what's going
Hmm.
on, really? And I'm just like, I want to tell you because I know the answer, but I can't tell you the
Yeah,
answer.
no, I get it. It's hard because, like, first she's like little by little getting these images back, but now she has these new images from a different person, and it's like, even in sleep, the homegirl doesn't have rest, and it's a lot.
Yeah, and then and then she has the first like real telepathic vibe. She's like having a nightmare and she's like, I'm not a monster, I'm not a monster. And she hears a voice that says, You're not. You are Mia Liesa. Wake up. And it's our BFF Delano.
Oh, and then Castile like helps wake her up some more, and
Yeah,
it's
and
just
she's like,
oh,
Did I scream? Like, what happened? And he was like, You started to squirm. Um, And he's like, You want to talk about it? And then she shook her head and he goes, You felt whatever you were dreaming, both Kieran and Delano. They kept looking back here. Delano started howling. That's when I woke you. And this is another example. She goes, do you think it's the primal thing? And he goes, The primal natum? I imagine so. I just think it's crazy. And so they're they've crossed the Skotos, and they're going to Scion's Cove, and they're just this it's just I
so
always
much going
find
on.
there's so much detail on like their travels and stuff like that. um
Yeah.
and so then they're traveling and he asks, like, who's gonna kill him, who's gonna kill Alistair, and she volunteers, my hand, stab
Yep.
stab stab
Because
stab.
I like that he like gave her that choice. Like, if you don't think he could do it, I'll do it. But either way, he dies. And so he's like, by your hand or mine, and she's just like, mine. He's mine, and I'm like, yeah, he is. Go get him.
So then they meet up with Emil to where Alistair is being held, and Emil comes in clutch and gives her her bloodstone dagger
Oh,
that Victor had gifted her on her 16th birthday. Y'all thought that that dagger was gone. Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
instead of a bad penny, it's our good penny. Like pure luck. He
It's
went to go look for clues and found it under the blood tree. And I'm just like, you're amazing. I love it.
accurate. And so I put so many sad faces. And then they also meet up with Quentin, and Quentin's like, well, where's Beckett? Like, this is so crazy.
Oh,
Like, what happened? And like, they had to break the news to Quentin. And I was just like, they deserve so much better than this.
Poppy helped him like with her power to like ease his emotions so that way he could deal with it properly and not like lose himself. And it just, oh, that poor kid, because he is just a kid. Like he may be years older to Poppy, but in their terms he's still just a kid, and it's just
Exactly.
heartbreaking that that's something they had to experience.
Yeah, and then Quentin notices Poppy's eyes and he says they're glowing. And then he goes, Actually, it's not your entire eye that is. There are wisps of light, silvery light throughout your irises. Um,
It's so
oh,
cool.
Cassio brings that up, and that's wild.
Yep.
Um,
And then they look at the Wolven, and theirs are like that too, streaked with the silver.
and then the last chapter says, Eyes like those of the woman I'd seen in a dream that I knew was no dream, the woman who had spoken to me. Every part of my being at that moment knew that she had that what she had said was the answer to everything. What is that? We'll never know.
Well, will we though?
Might. We might.
Keep
We just have
reading,
to
we'll
find out.
find out.
Yeah, so part 1, this is gonna have to be a 3-parter because ain't no way. But part 1, Sippin N Bitchin on all the things. So do that. And then if you show notes will also be on our Patreon. But yes.
Check it out. You trust me, guys. If there's anything I can use to incentivize you to join the Patreon, it's these show notes because we go very unhinged. We don't say everything that our show notes say, and our
No,
show notes
some
are
of it's not
unhinged.
appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of it's just not appropriate, even though this is an explicit podcast, it's still not appropriate. But yeah, so listen up for part 2 tomorrow. And we'll
We
catch
love
you
you.
later, bitches.